Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Reg viewers. Now, as you know, we always ask the questions here that you're asking amongst yourselves. So that's why today we're doing, how do you do IT in a zoo? Unusual. Now, joining us today for this, we have from Microsoft, Neil Sanderson. Hello, Neil.
Hi.
Now, Neil, when you go to zoos and things like that, do you say, we'll do all the IT, but we're not doing it for those penguins? That's Linux, you know. And also, from our star guest today, from Chester Zoo, Phil Morris. Hello, Phil.
Hiya.
Now, Phil, did you bring any of your animals with you
No,
today?
they're all safely away.
Well, that's a shame, but not too much of a shame. Because at the Register, we're very fond of animals. As you know, we have one of our as our logo. So we brought some animals to make you feel comfortable. We've got a little frog here. It's a very rare frog because, look, he's got magnets in his paws.
Okay.
And we've got Catbert from Dilbert. Say hello to the viewers. There we go. There's Catbert. And also from the children's television, 70s television programme, The Clangers, we have Tiny Clanger, who's not a real animal. But that's all we had. So just a quick tip, if you are going to start a zoo, don't keep your animals in a plastic bag like we did, or else people complain about that. So, you're very welcome today. We'll put them there. Thank you very much. And also from our old mates, Freeform Dynamics, we have Martin Atherton. Martin, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And working with John Collins, you're very experienced with taking care of wild animals.
This is absolutely true, yes.
Yeah, okay. So on with that. First of all, the interface for all of you who are new or have forgotten how to use computers. What's up here? Well, up here there's how to ask questions, and we want you to do that. We're going to be talking about real-world business today, so this should be something that comes out of your experience as well. If you want to ask any question, do it while we're on air, and then we can put the question. You type it in there, it comes out of my mouth here. Also, you can get the bios of of everyone that's in the studio today. You can download a copy of the presentation as a PDF so that you can either look at it in a different window, keep it afterwards, share it with your mates. And afterwards, give us your feedback. We do more of what you like, less of what you don't like at the Reg, and so we need to know what you like. Right, let's get on with it. Martin, why are we talking about a zoo today?
We'll get to that shortly. Let's take a little look at what we are going to run through, and the majority of it will be hearing from Phil about Chester Zoo's real-world experiences.
So it's kind of a real world rather than one of those big architectural drawing.
Absolutely. I don't think there'll be any architectural drawings at all on view today, which is probably a good thing, I guess.
Bit of a relief.
So first of all, I'm just going to sort of set the scene and a bit of context for today's session. Then we're going to introduce Phil properly, and I'll shut up and let Phil talk to us about Chester Zoo as a business, how it views IT, and of course the point of this is to find out how it's been adopting and using and hopefully benefiting from its virtualization experiences. So the theme for today is really about learning from the real adopters. And we'll be looking at sort of elements around engaging with the business, things around managing risks, some more sort of operational and techie related things, but not too much techie, sort of the role of management and automation, and of course anything else that occurs to us as we're talking, anything else we can think of to throw at him. And then we'll spend a bit of time putting it all back into context and all back together, and perhaps giving it a bit of structure to everything that we've been talking about, so that people can actually have something sort of tangible to sort of go away with and think about in terms of what they might be thinking about for their businesses in terms of virtualization. So I think we should get started. So the previous webcast in this series on virtualization, which is linked to the virtualization lab that we're running with the Register with Microsoft, which you guys can go and or the viewers can go and look at on theregister.com, it talked about all the stuff that you sort of really need to think about in terms of virtualization from an infrastructure sort of perspective. It was more about the sort of, what is it, why you're doing it, that kind of thing. In this webcast, we're going to look at it more from a sort of a business exploitation perspective, and this is about making sure that we can sort of get into a position to actually take advantage of what virtualization can offer businesses in terms of doing their business and getting on with the things that they do as a business. And this raises quite a few sort of key questions in some quite interesting areas, and not all of them are actually techie or necessarily involve technology specifically. So I've already mentioned them: engaging with the business, managing risk, and the role of automation management, and that sort of thing. So we've got an opportunity to provide lots of real-world context in this because, as we've mentioned, we've got a real-life customer who's been through all this. And the really cool thing about this is that he's not from a major corporation. So hopefully, what we hear today is going to make all this virtualization stuff seem very real and relevant and tangible to everybody out there.
Are we going to get into the messy stuff, the stuff that doesn't work, as well as the stuff that does?
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be wrong to just say, hey, it's all fantastic and this is what we did. The bit that sort of describes this is what we did involves some of the things that didn't work and some of the workarounds that had to be put in place and all that kind of stuff.
I think also, though, it's what's interesting is that a lot of the same issues happen with the largest organisations as with some of the smaller. So a lot of the issues that we'll talk about today are still relevant for larger organisations as well. But the message for me is the interesting thing here is you don't have to be a massive corporation to take advantage of virtualization, but you do have to think about a lot of the same things, even if you're a lot smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. And one last sort of, I suppose, context-setting thing, lest we forget, as it says on the slide, virtualization's not a done deal. One of the things that we pride ourselves on at Freeform Dynamics is that we really take a look at the mainstream. We're interested in what the early adopters and the bleeding edges are doing, but we want to put that into the context of what everybody else is doing from the point of view of their businesses and how these cool things actually fit and actually might be able to help. So this is sort of real world stuff, and virtualization, if we can describe it as a journey, we're really only at the start. We're sort of playing around at the edges, but it's moving into sort of mainstream environments and that kind of thing. It's becoming the way that we do IT. It's not become the way we do IT, but we're sort of we're on that road. So that's a good sort of context setting thing, I think. And then what I think I should do now is sort of stop talking and let Phil talk to us about Chester Zoo in general. And Phil, if you can sort of tell us everything about Chester Zoo up to the point where virtualization was seen as something that you guys had to do.
Okay, well, I've been at Chester Zoo for the best part of 11 years. Prior to me being employed there, the only IT that they had was one of the reptile keepers would do some work in the afternoons and knock a couple of databases up. And I think they realised that they needed to move forward.
About how many people work at Chester Zoo?
250 full-time, and in peak season 500. So it's a fairly major employer for Chester. We employ a lot of highly academic staff as well, because there's a lot of research and behind the scenes academia that goes on.
Right, because a lot of people think that a zoo is just animals walking up and down in front of them, but you've got research going on, and
it's two kind of distinct businesses. You have the kind of front end leisure business that people come to have a good day out, but there's also the mission related stuff that sits behind that, and really one drives the other.
Now, if what you did went wrong, if there was some IT disaster at Chester Zoo, what happens? What's the danger?
The very worst case scenario is we create such a queue that the M53 gets blocked.
so basically traffic freezes up in the northwest because your computers aren't working.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. And about how many visitors do you get?
Per year, 1.3 million paid for visitors per year. Our peak days tend to be 15, but I've been there when we've had 22,000. So it's it's quite busy.
Yeah, and they're all coming through the gates.
They all come through the gates within a 2-hour time frame.
Right. Okay.
So in terms of the requirements so that the leisure side of the business, in terms of the requirements that places on IT, what are they?
There's a real requirement to provide a robust and reliable service. We've been in situations where we've tried changing processes and we've added an extra 2 or 3 seconds to the transaction time at the gate, and that's backed up the queues by 40 minutes. So there's a lot of intensive management that needs to be done to get the people through the gates in a timely fashion. And then we've got all of the normal business requirements like an accounting system, time and attendance, health and safety, personnel, anything that any other business would have as well, and accounting. And they all require a reliable platform to work on.
So, if Chester Zoo's IT used to be run part-time by the Reptile guy, how has Chester Zoo's approach to IT evolved since Reptile guy to sort of, you and today?
We've gone from a situation of issuing kind of bus tickets at the entrance on a windy up thing to a fully automated EPOS solution. And we can talk about a bit more about that later if you want, but we've got some quite big plans that we want to put into place for the EPOS solution. It's a really big site. It's 110 acres, a further 300 acres outside. And when I got there was no networking infrastructure at all. There was a couple of buildings that were linked by an external ISDN link. The first thing that we did was install DSL hot copper, which is broadband by any other terms, and that was sort of 10 years ago. We moved on from that to the Cisco long reach Ethernet product, which is pretty good. We had sort of 15 buildings linked up on a centralised kind of broadband product. And in the last 5 years, we've installed literally, tens of kilometres of fibre optics. So pretty much all of the buildings now are linked via fibre, with a commitment to link fibre into any new exhibit that we put in.
So from a future readiness perspective, has the stuff you've done at the network level sort of got you in a position where you can do other stuff and the network's there waiting for it?
Definitely. Yeah. We have a lot of sort of little kiosks and small retail outlets around the site, and all of those are networked now and linked over a networking infrastructure, so we can do management reports at a till level. We can check stock at a till level, so we can operate like a proper business. It's
So Neil, this is the sort of journey that a lot of companies of this size will have gone through.
Yeah, so I think that what's often happened is IT has evolves quite slowly. The trick is how do you make some right decisions at the beginning that are still good decisions later on. Mm-hmm. That's often quite tricky. But what you're trying to do, I tend to find is, from when I was an IT manager in previous roles, you're trying to keep your options open because you don't want to close doors in the future. So you've got to invest correctly now, but know that you're making smart decisions and keeping doors open in the future.
Yeah, that's right.
And that applies to virtualization as well, I think.
Yeah, so it's these sort of smart decisions that you've been making in the last couple of years that we're dealing with today most of the time, isn't it?
I'm interested in understanding where the drive for the decisions that you've made so far, so not including virtualization, has come from. And what I mean is are you guys in IT pushing the changes because there are better ways of doing things, or is the business saying, hey guys, there's got to be a better way of running our business, can you help us?
I think a lot of the changes have been driven by IT. We recognised that we were running a decade behind where we could be, and just in terms of management information, that simply wasn't available. We were talking about a latency of 2 weeks to get management information, which you can't make proper decisions on. So I took a view very early on that I needed to increase the bandwidth and keep increasing the bandwidth so that we could create this network within the zoo and get the information out to people. One of the products that we have developed in-house is a product called Swift, which is a management information system, and it's site-wide information and forecasting of trends, and that's an amalgamation of all of the site-wide information that we can get, and we're drilling into that to look at trends and to look at how we can work smarter.
What sort of trends, like who's visiting, when they're coming, these sort of trends?
Yes, the purchasing profiles, the kind of group profiles as well. So if you know your group profiles, you know who you can advertise
You
to.
are a seasonal entertainment.
We are a seasonal entertainment. Yeah, we're open all the way through the year, but the bulk of our visitors come through in the summer months.
Right, so it's no good having your information a month later about what was happening in July, because by then August's happened.
Yeah.
Right.
So, one of the big things that you've obviously just told us about is that you've got the sort of the network layer in place, if you like, both for sort of current requirements and sounds like it's quite sort of flexible for future requirements as well. At the same time, what was the situation, if you like, in the server room or in the IT department in terms of the rest of the infrastructure that you were using to run apps and run the EPOS terminals and all that kind of stuff?
It's very difficult coming from a small environment, because it's almost impossible to go to your board and say, I've got a plan for the next 5 years, it's going to cost us £500,000 or whatever it is, because the perception of spending in IT is so small. So it has been a gradual thing, and we've gone from a situation where we've built our own servers from stuff that we bought off the shelf, motherboards and cases that we bought off the shelf, to proper commercially available products. And that growth has been difficult to sell, and because of that, we've become compromised in some ways, and we got to a situation where we had an awful lot of individual boxes because we wanted to maintain the one application, one box model. So we ended up with a situation where we had lots and lots of boxes inside our server room that were creating huge amounts of heat, using a lot of electricity, and also giving us an end-of-life problem as well. And we looked at virtualization maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and we looked at the VMware model, and I could see that it sorted the problems out for us, but we couldn't afford it. It was multiple times out of our price range, and we looked at the early versions of Microsoft virtual server and terminal server services, and that kind of got us a little way there, but until we were introduced to Hyper-V, I could see that was a product that gave us pretty much what we were looking for, but within the budget that we had to spend.
So we're going to talk about what you've got on site at the moment, and then drill into some of the areas that I introduced at the start. But what was the sort of point of no return in terms of, look, we've got to do something now?
Realising that if I put another server into the server room, the air conditioning wouldn't cope. We got to that point, and I thought, we have to do something about this. It's not something that we can keep adding air conditioning, growing the room. It just wasn't a sustainable model, and that's something that, as an organisation, we're very keen to promote, is the environment. So we're doing all of these super things out in the zoo, and then we've got this IT department that's sitting there consuming huge amounts of power and chucking out loads and loads of heat, and I wasn't comfortable with it. So we took a view that we needed to move forward on that.
So it's very much the model that you hear over and over again, because when we see people's slides, I mean, there's a lot of presentations about virtualization, you see people's slides, whenever there's a picture of a server room, it looks beautiful. And whenever I've been into a server room, it's not quite as beautiful.
There's stuff everywhere.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that are very much on the edge now.
Yeah,
and it's and that pressure has built up.
And I think it goes back to the model of which was in its day was a good model. Single-purpose servers that did one role and were all separated. And but I think we've come to an extent, we've come to the end of that whole trend, and we're seeing in the data centres the fact we can't continue with that model anymore because of the problems with space and power and cooling, and it's not necessary now. So virtualization doesn't solve all those problems, but it allows us to move away from those single-purpose servers, and also servers where you only have one operating system. So actually you can now virtualize different operating systems on the same platform. So we're talking about very heterogeneous virtualization being really quite achievable and affordable.
Well, let's get on to what you did with that, Phil, especially seeing as you chose Microsoft as the route to do that, which is the non-obvious solution for a lot of people.
We looked at VMware, as I say, and it's it's a very good product, and I would have loved to have been able to implement it 3 or 4 years ago, but it was just too expensive. And we were introduced to the Microsoft products on the R1 release, and we did some testing on that. And via the partner that we were working with, we were introduced to an early adopters program for R2. And I jumped at that chance because it meant we got some extra support from Microsoft. I knew that if Microsoft were involved, it would be a project that went really well. So I went for that, and I haven't looked back really. We're licensed for 4 now, so we're running 3 at the moment, and we over this next year we'll progress onto the 4 nodes, which will give us a fully redundant solution.
And I guess you've got that classic problem as well that we've discussed in these webcasts before, that you don't have a lot of expertise on site.
We don't have a lot. The guys won't like me for this, but we're all Microsoft trained. We've all gone through the courses. We're pretty competent, but where we lack is exposure to new products. So if we were to go out to a consultancy who had installed Hyper-V, they've done it 10, 20, 30 times before we've got there. We haven't done it before, and we recognised that we wanted that experience to lead us through the process, because it's a big decision going from a physical to a virtual world. There's lots of potential things that could go wrong, and you're exposing yourself to lots of potential risks as well. So it was really important that we found a partner that we were happy with, and it was really important that as a team the technical guys were on board with it as well, because they've come from the same background as me, where multiple servers on one physical box is witchcraft really. It's something
it
you
does
don't
seem
do.
that way, yeah.
So there was a lot of apprehension at the beginning looking at this, and no, hang on a minute, we've gone from a model where you told us for the last 5 years or the last 10 years that we've got to have one server, one box, and we're going now to everything that you said we shouldn't do, and that's put lots of servers on one physical box. So we were naturally apprehensive about that, and it took I don't know, maybe 6 months of going to product seminars, seeing demonstrations, and reading and watching web presentations on it, just to build that confidence, not just within myself, but within the team as well.
So it's not just selling it to the management; it's selling it to your own
sell
team.
it to the team, yeah.
We're going to come to that, because I think that's a pretty key point.
Yeah.
But just going back to what you've got at the moment, or in terms of where you started testing and playing around with the R1 release, and then when you actually came to do it, the R2 release was out. What were the main differences between those two products? Was there a lot of new stuff that came on stream that thought, brilliant, the timing sort of thing?
The big driver, there was one key thing that when we started on the R1 installation, I knew R2 was coming, and I knew we'd get onto the early adopters thing, and the thing that we wanted was the live migration, because that was the thing that we could see that VMware did that in R1 you didn't have, and it was a really key feature that we wanted, and I was convinced that it would come in a timely fashion, and it did. So the original installation we did on R1, we got a feel for it, we went through some of the technical problems on that, and then we redeployed the installation on R2.
And was that with was the initial testing stuff on some of the what looks like? I mean, if we look at what the systems that you've actually virtualized, we've got accounts and time attendance sort of systems and personnel related stuff, and then we've got the more as we've acknowledged the really business critical stuff, the systems that get people through the door. Otherwise, the motorway backs up. So where did you start?
Well, the EPOS stuff was left until the end, until we were comfortable. I think the personnel database was the first thing that we virtualised. That was on R1. We virtualised accounts, that came in early on as well, and we didn't move to the EPOS solution until we actually implemented R2.
Was there a process there of building confidence with the business?
Yes, it's strange that, because the business, they don't really see what's going on. We talk to them about this project, and I'm not really sure that it goes any further than the couple of meetings that we have to explain it. But that was one of my measures of whether the project was going to be successful or not, because really there shouldn't be any change. There shouldn't be any perceptive change at the end of it, from the physical to the virtual world. I knew it wasn't going to make everything hugely faster or produce any incredible gains like that. So what I was hoping to get out of it was a more robust, more easy to manage system without any compromises that became apparent to the management and the users.
So before we move on, appreciate what you just said about there shouldn't be any sort of perceived change from the point of view of people either signing the bills or paying the bills or using the systems. But there's obviously quite a difference physically in the IT shop right now. As we can see, you were sort of using a 30-odd sized server estate, and now you're not. So do you just want to briefly talk us through
We were up to about 40 servers, 40 physical servers. We've planned to virtualise 30 of those. At the moment, I think we've done about 15. And it's an ongoing process. It's something that we didn't want to do all at once. We didn't feel comfortable with the risk that exposed us to, but we wanted to continue to gain confidence with the product. So we've gone through a lot of the applications that are not business critical have been done, and we've virtualised 3 of the business critical applications, which are the EPOS servers.
Is there anything that you are definitely not going to look at virtualising?
I'm still not convinced that we're going to virtualise the mail server. We may do. That isn't on the cards at the moment.
Why would you not?
I'm just concerned about resources and the amount of storage that I don't really want to sacrifice off the SAN to put the mail server into the virtualised environment.
What do you think about that, Neil?
So from an Exchange point of view, yeah, very, very happy to see that virtualised. So there's obviously considerations about how you go about doing it. Mm-hmm. But in general, Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, all the key Microsoft workloads are all pretty established virtualisation workloads now. So there's lots of guidance, lots of best practice. But it does depend on your individual circumstances and the trade-offs.
We're running a pretty old version of Exchange as well, and I suspect that by the time we get to 2010 Exchange, we'll put into the virtualised environment anyway.
Yeah. So yes, certainly can, and there's lots of guidance and best practice around.
Would you suggest, in more general terms, would you suggest that people take it bit by bit with these systems and have a look at them, virtualise some stuff, leave some other stuff for later?
Definitely. So I think it's a case, as Phil's been saying, work out what you're trying to achieve, first of all, and then start to look at the workloads and the applications you've got, and build your expertise, build your knowledge, and build your own confidence for your own team with what they're doing, because it is a change in the way things are done, and it has impacts in lots of other areas, like how do you manage them, how do you design for disaster recovery and continuity. If you're taking things off separate boxes and putting them all together, then the criticality is obviously increased. So yeah, it's a case of understand what you're trying to do, and then understand the steps that you can take most effectively to get you there, and build from there.
Okay.
In terms of engaging with the business, and as is the way with these discussions, we've sort of touched upon quite a few of these points already, particularly with regards to the critical infrastructure environments around the EPOS terminals and servers. But one thing that you mentioned earlier, Phil, that was quite interesting was that, and not surprising, was the inference that, frankly, the business guys okaying the decisions that you had to justify them to weren't actually that interested in virtualization per se, or indeed technology per se. So that begs the question, I get told off for saying that, I'm not going to say that again. It raises the question about the sort of relationship that you have with them in that, Phil, we trust you to find the right solution, whatever that is. By the way, what is it? Oh, it's virtualization. Or did you have to go a little bit further than that? Or?
No, I think that's probably explains my comment. There is, I perceive, a lot of trust between myself and the senior management, and they trust me to come up with what I believe is the right solution for them. And they don't necessarily want to drill particularly very deeply into what it is we're providing. They're interested in the cost, they're interested in the end results, and sort of what goes in the middle really is pretty much academic to them.
Yeah, I hate to bring up the recession because we always do, but we've just been through one. We're still in one, perhaps. Who knows? And did that affect your plans? Did that slow you up?
Yes, it did. There's probably a lot to talk about the recession. It didn't, in terms of visitor figures, actually hit us. Our budget ended up clear at the end of the year. We didn't lose any revenue. But in terms of perception within the business, I think people got very worried as to what may happen. And the initial virtualization project was frozen sort of this time last year. And it wasn't until we'd got a couple of months into the recession that we looked at it again, and I came back with a trimmed down solution of what we wanted to do. The first budget proposal was to do the whole thing in one sort of shot and create the redundant infrastructure, and that just wasn't going to happen with the sort of money that we had available. So we've broken up into a couple of distinct projects now, with getting initially some of the business critical stuff on, and then with an ultimate goal of providing a fully redundant solution.
Are there any cost implications so you started off with the big idea, and it was going to cost X, and so actually we need to do it in sort of 4 chunks. So did it cost any more by breaking it up, or was it simply spreading it?
It cost a little bit more because the original quotation that we put together included a very high spec SAN, 2 very high spec SANs, and one of the compromises that we had to make was to cut back on what we were spending on the SAN. But ultimately we're going to need all of that SAN resource anyway, so there will be a certain amount of wasted expenditure in there.
There's always a hurdle to get over in that, actually, guys, we've got to spend a bit of money to save quite a lot of money over the long term. And so what's the sort of the ratio?
In terms of justifying it wasn't particularly that difficult. We have £11,000 worth of projected electrical savings per annum. And we were also in a position where a lot of our servers were sort of 5 to 7 years old, which meant there was a significant capital outlay coming up anyway. And instead of buying more single servers, we've put it into high-powered multiprocessor rack servers and virtualized on them. So in terms of payback, we were looking at 3 years for a complete payback solution on it, and that was at very, very conservative estimates.
What do you think it will be?
If you exclude all of the perceived advantages that you get, I'm talking about the extra redundancy and all of that kind of thing, which is hard to quantify, the actual cash payback is probably going to be about 2 to 2.5 years, which is excellent for any kind of IT project.
It sounds like a large proportion of that is on the energy saving.
Energy and replacement hardware as well.
Yeah.
We would have had to have replaced those servers.
Especially if you built them yourself. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying you're bad at building servers and everything, but there's factories to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to get on to some of the other, let's say, technical or infrastructure knock-on effects of virtualization in a moment. But some of the sort of less obvious or less technical ones, e.g., presumably you're still in the same server room.
Yes.
I know you've got 300 acres that the zoo's developing, but I'm guessing it's not thinking that one of the, half-acre plots is going to be build a new data centre.
We've got distinct frame rooms around the site. There's 3 frame rooms with 1 main server room. And the next project that we put in will create another frame room.
Excellent. One of the things that you mentioned some time ago now, actually, was the word risks, or the word risk, I should say. And what I'd like to sort of hear a little bit about in the context of your project are some of the areas that you were aware of, that you knew you had to work through. And we've talked about some of them, sort of like making sure that the business guys knew enough or were happy with what was going on and all that kind of stuff. But from the doing the actual project side of things, can you talk to us about some of the things you knew you would have to overcome, and then also some of the things that popped up while you were doing the project?
I think the biggest concern that we had was the virtualization of the EPOS servers. The implications of those going down, really, it would cost me my job if it all went completely wrong.
And it's it's one of these things that people back off from when it comes to virtualization. This kind of real-time stuff that with those huge risks attached to it. So there must have been a little bit of sense of bravery.
I was very apprehensive, and I dipped my toe in slowly. But we tested it, we trialled it, we did some. I mean, that's one of the great things about the virtual environment is you can take things out and create your own test network. So we did a lot of testing, and as part of that testing procedure, a few problems came up that we hadn't anticipated. For example, the EPOS server has a USB dongle that licenses the software.
Right, so it has to be in the server. It has to
be physically in the server to
work.
make the EPOS solution work.
Yeah.
And of course, in the virtual environment, you've got no USB ports. So we routed around to find a piece of software that would map over a network IP connection a virtual USB port, which we found. And then, of course, you've got the worry of, well, how reliable is this piece of software that we've just found on the internet going to be? So there was some trepidation around that. But it works fine, and it's been working fine now for 3-4 months. So
that reminds me a little bit of the it was a book I read years ago, Eli Goldratt. I think it's called The Goal or something. It's about a production guy that is trying to work out how he's going to do this huge order, and he gets this guru sort of talking to him down the pub, and he ends up optimizing different areas of his sort of production environment, and finds out that he's just actually, if he just optimizes one bit, he's just creating a bottleneck somewhere else, and so it's more a case of standing back and looking at the whole thing. So it sounds like some of the kit that you were using, and obviously the dongle thing you found a workaround to, but it sounds like a lot of the kit that you use, and perhaps this is relevant to everyone out there listening, wasn't necessarily bought or certainly designed and implemented with virtualization in mind.
The original, we've bought some servers that we bought after the decision to virtualize, and we've had a couple of Dell Rack servers, 2950s, that we bought prior to that, and we were fortunate that they sat within the hardware compatibility list for it.
So there's no real way I would have thought that you could have necessarily anticipated the example so far is the USB dongle thing. Are there any other sort of surprises that popped up?
We had to do some tweaking to the way the EPOS transaction logs worked, because it's a real-time system. There was a lot of traffic which was saturating the SAN to some extent, to a lot. When we first put it in, before we tweaked it, the one EPOS server was taking a third of the resource of the entire SAN. So we needed to tweak that a little bit, and again we found a workaround to that.
There's a question here. Let's have a look. It's from Sanjeev. He's saying about what kind of connection methodology you use between a server and a SAN.
We went with Equalogic SANs, which are network Ethernet-based SANs rather than fibre networks, and we've got 3 1 gigabit network interfaces between each of the nodes and the server on a 24 port HP 1 gigabit switch.
Mm-hmm. And that's worked in the way that you expected.
It's worked, yeah, no compromises. I think one of the things that I really wanted to get out of it was to was not to compromise any of the performance in terms of people working on the time and attendance system or the account system, and there's been no compromise. It hasn't slowed it down at all.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any compromise on other sort of infrastructure knock-on effects? So you mentioned the SAN earlier. You originally planned for buying sort of 2 new ones,
yes.
And I'm assuming you had to downgrade that those aspirations. So what's the score now with storage and the impact that sort of doing virtualization has on the requirements there?
The SAN requirements are probably one of the more significant things that you need to deal with. Because all of your information is actually in one place, that needs to be very fast, and it also needs to be very reliable. Because if you lose your SAN, you lose everything. Mm-hmm. You're very exposed. And the original model that we looked at was 2 high-speed SANs that were mirroring, so that it would give us that redundancy. At the moment, what we have is a very large SATA-based SAN and a smaller high-speed SAN that we use for sort of transaction and database logs. So if I was to offer any advice to anybody, it would be don't scrimp on the SAN, because initially we thought we would get away with using the big, slow SAN, and we couldn't. At the end of the day, we couldn't. By the time we'd looked at the disk IOs on it and the utilisation of the SAN, it was apparent that we needed some high-speed storage in there as well.
So I know we have to move on from this, but just very quickly, Neil, that's coming up more and more, the idea that you don't cut back on what you're doing with the SAN.
Yeah, I think so, and I think this is part of, virtualization puts different demands in different areas of the infrastructure, and it's not immediately obvious where some of those are going to be, and also some of our capacity modelling tools and our ability to do capacity planning doesn't always work very well still for virtualization environments. So, I'm not sure. So we can do a lot more to understand what those implications are going to be.
Well, that's a job for your elves at Microsoft.
Well, I think it's more from an industry point of view. I think in terms of how we can get more experience and understand these implications. And virtualization isn't just something that happens on the server. It has implications across the network and the storage. And some of your design decisions are going to be different, and we just need more experience to take better decisions as organisations in the future.
Well, we've certainly spent a lot of time over the last 12 months looking at storage from the point of view of how it's evolving, and obviously one sort of answer to the storage problem is storage virtualization, which we're not talking about today. But one of the things that we've sort of found out in our ongoing research, particularly with sort of smaller companies, is that there isn't actually that much storage expertise out there. The expertise in general is much more general, and I think that sort of the whole growth of and use of virtualization is actually going to bring some storage skills back into the mix, because it can't not do. Granted, they won't be the same as they were traditionally, because the whole point of storage virtualization, in the same way of server virtualization, is more flexible, more dynamic, does what you want it to, and you can mix and match with sort of more expensive storage and cheaper storage for depending on the requirements of the data at any given time, which of course changes over time.
Very quickly, before we move on, but this deals with 2 or 3 questions that have come on here. How much did you get help from consultants, and how much help did you get from Microsoft in sorting out these problems?
We got lots of help from consultants. We paid, I think, for about 14 days. Mm-hmm. We ended up using 11 of those to complete the project, and we have 3 for tinkering later. Mm-hmm. And I think Microsoft spent a couple of weeks with us doing various things. We had a telephone support line that we could access. There was the web. interface that we could work on.
You think that's money well spent?
Absolutely, yeah, I do, because we're good at what we do. We manage the networks well, we understand all of that, but we don't have the exposure experience to installing a new system like Hyper-V. It's something that we would have gone in blind, and I just wasn't comfortable doing it. It had such a potential risk of going bad that we had to get some professional help with it.
And the Microsoft involvement was very much, as Phil was saying, part of the early adopter program, which is something we do for some of these new technologies. So Windows Server 2008 R2 with Hyper-V in this case.
Is it too late for everyone else to get on the early adopter?
So that one's finished, but it's a good pointer for people if they want to use these technologies sort of just prior to launch and get their experience and also get that opportunity to take the business benefits early. Then these are good programs to be on.
You have an R3 early adopter program.
So we're keen to. We do run these things occasionally in the UK, and it's not right for every customer, but
it's worth looking at.
It's worth looking at, worth considering.
Okay, we need to crack on.
Before we briefly touch on sort of management and automation, sort of operational elements of this, quick question on the overall project. In hindsight, you mentioned there's a high risk of things going wrong. Would it be fairer to say that the stakes were high because of the sort of the elements of the business that you were putting into the virtual environment? So in hindsight, was it easier or harder than you expected?
It was actually easier. It was probably one of the smoothest projects that I've ever run. It really went very well. Which is surprising, considering it's probably one of the biggest step changes that we've had within the business since I've been working there.
That's pretty reassuring, I think, or at least we can't apply that to every project that's ever going to happen. But
okay, 10 minutes, good. Martin.
Right. Okay. So operationally, day-to-day stuff. One of the things that we've measured on a project with you actually, Neil, a couple of years back, was the real sense of day-to-day management or IT's job being made quite a lot more difficult because of we just called it the fragmented approach, not through any sort of fault necessarily, that they have to managing their stuff. It's like this tool and this guy does this tool and this guy does this, and so on and so on and so on. And that's great at a sort of a component management level, but it's not so great when you're trying to get a consolidated view across things, so you can see, well, is the sum of all that stuff, which is my service, actually doing what it's supposed to be doing? So what's been the impact of introducing virtualization into the mix for you guys?
It's consolidated a lot of interfaces. We're using the DPM System Center, and it allows us to step back and take a much clearer overall view of what we're doing. I mean, System Center is a pretty big product, but it's better having that big product than a lot of disparate little products, from our experience anyway. And if we had our guys with us, the people who are using the backup and the DPM stuff, they would say the same thing, that there's a big advantages to having it in one central area.
And does that give the people working with you and for you more chance to apply specialist skills, or is it sort of flattening out the requirement to be a specialist in?
I think it flattens the skills out a little bit, because historically we'd have one guy that would mainly focus on doing the backups and another guy that would support him when he was off. But because it's all within the one framework now, the skills kind of merge a little bit, which raises the bar for everybody.
Fair enough. And just one comment on automation. I know when we talked earlier, prior to this, you said that it wasn't necessarily such a big deal for you guys just yet, because you're not really at the point of having thousands or millions of virtual machines to sort of keep track of. So it sounds like anything around, or anything involving the word automation, is probably going to be around the sort of the SAN and the storage and the backup and that side of things. Is that a fair guess?
The SAN, I mean, the SAN has changed the way we do things. The ability to do snapshots, the ability to automate those so that we can roll back sort of 15 minutes. That's changed the way our backups have been done. Historically, backups were a terrible thing to get involved with because of the time that it would take, and then the time that it would take to do a restore if you needed to do a restore. Whereas the virtual environment, you cut those time slots down an awful lot, so it makes the recovery much easier.
Which is the whole point.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
And managing that complexity again, so the virtual environment adds more complexity to the environment in lots of ways. So and it's nice to hear about Data Protection Manager from System Center, because it's part of trying to simplify the complexity and have it be much easier for different people to be involved in.
Yes.
Okay, Phil, a quick moment on lessons learned and top tips. I know we've covered off quite a lot of that, but are there any that you'd really sort of call out?
I think the real thing that struck in my mind was there was quite a bit of resistance from internally about this technology, and it was really important that I got our guys on board because it wouldn't have worked without their support.
You mean the IT guys?
Yes, yeah. And I think once I knew they were comfortable with it, I was confident that it would go ahead.
I mean, in the early stages, have you achieved the savings that you were expecting to do financially? This is one question that's come in.
Yes, certainly. We've certainly achieved the need not to spend on new servers. There's no. That's probably saved us £40,000. The electrical savings, if I'm honest with you, have not fully materialised yet because we still have some virtualising to do.
Right.
But there's no doubt that we're using less electricity than we were before.
Mm-hmm. So that fairly quickly you can get an idea of something that you can report back. If we're looking to management, you can report back
absolutely,
that it's on track in terms of cost savings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're almost ready to sort of start pulling all the different elements that we've been talking about together into some kind of sort of rough structure, so that the guys watching this have got something tangible to perhaps go away and use and sort of think about in a more sort of stepwise fashion. And Neil, I'm going to hand this bit over to you.
Yeah, well, I think what we're just trying to do here is summarise quite a few of the points in terms of traditional IT life cycle type model, where what we try and do is decide what we're trying to achieve, design it, move it into the live environment, and then run it in the live environment and manage it out, retire it ultimately. And I think a lot of the points that have come out really fit in very well with this. So in terms of what are we trying to do, actually what we usually do with virtualization is enabling a service to the business rather than doing virtualization for its own sake. So how does it fit with what the organisation's trying to do? And are we as IT actually organised to achieve it? Have we got the confidence in the technology and the skills and so on? And then around design, it's really the traditional areas that we need to focus on. But with virtualization, we may not have the experience, or there may be other things that we need to bear in mind in terms of how can we actually model a virtual environment in the future as we could with a physical one. And are the service levels that we're thinking about actually realistic, or are they excessive because virtualization is involved and users expect everything to happen instantly, and not every piece can. And then if we're moving it into a live environment, a lot of organisations that I've talked to recently are talking about how do they protect the live environment from just lots and lots of virtual machines. So we've always historically protected the live environment very well with lots of discipline. How do we maintain that when actually it's very easy to make new virtual machines very quickly? And then we still need to operate. We still need to manage it in live production to deliver the service levels that the business needs. And that's where we do need the management tools, and we need the ability to investigate errors and ensure that we can take them out. So just trying to put that, what we've discussed, in that kind of framework, because virtualization changes some things, but a lot of the same things we need to think about remain the same for organisations of lots of different sizes and types.
Especially, it doesn't take that management problem away that you've always had. It just changes the nature of what you're doing with it.
Yeah, I think it makes it more significant because you have sometimes more complexity, you've got more criticality on some of your on fewer boxes, and you want the flexibility of your staff to maybe be able to deal with multiple different areas rather than just siloing your staff in the way that your servers used to be siloed.
I like the comment about discipline. Is that something you guys have had to either instill or simply just not give people access to, to the risk of creating VM sprawl, or is it just not a thing for you guys at the moment?
It is a thing, and nobody would implement a VM without first discussing it as a group. So there is a process that we go through. Do we need it? Why do we need it? People think there isn't a cost to VMs. Well, there is a cost because you're eating up your resources every time you put one on. So we have to quantify whether we really need it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as for those penguins that you mentioned at the beginning, we're very happy from a Microsoft point of view to virtualize those on Windows and to manage them with System
I can see
Center.
that was on your mind. I could see it in your face, actually. Well, question, Phil, that's come in. Did you consider outsourcing the whole thing? We've gone through almost an entire webcast without mentioning the cloud, so I have to now.
We looked at it and we rejected it for other reasons than cost. We wanted to actually improve our internet bandwidth, and we wanted to improve our infrastructure internally so that we could. We've got lots of plans to do video work and more interaction between the zoo and its customers. So we want to continue to grow internally, and we need that link.
We are out of time, guys. I'm sorry, there's one or two questions that we haven't answered, so we will answer those at a later date. That's fine, isn't it? There's nothing too difficult. We just ran out of time. Right. But there's been some great feedback from the people who are listening. So this, we've really, thanks for those people who said that we've done something that's relevant to you, because we need to know that. Fill in your feedback and let us know about what you thought of it today. There will be a version of this that you can watch at a later date. Share it with your friends. And so it just leaves me to say thank you very much to Neil, Phil, Martin. Thank you for. I've been Tim Phillips. Goodbye from my little furry friends, and join us again for our next Regcast. Thank you.